I'm fine. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Have a seat.
Okay.
How are you doing with your research?
Well, I want to start writing tomorrow.
Okay.
But this week I looked for articles and books and web pages, and I want to talk to you about it.
Okay.
And here I have the articles I found.
All right.
If you want to check.
So let's see. You're still thinking about. Do you want to? Okay. Did you decide on an applied research problem or a basic research problem? Have you decided on which?
I want
of these
to
two
make
options?
a case study.
Okay.
So it's one.
Because the first you have, I wish to learn more about how social networks can help teachers in the classroom because I want to find out how the social networks can be used as teaching tools in order to find out how to use them in the future.
If I should implement them. And I want to talk with the teachers instead of, because cuando se lo hace como con estudiantes y maestros, that will be really like broad. So I would only like to talk about with teachers. So I would like to make like interviews or questionnaire.
Okay, have you or are you basing your research problem from your literature review that you did last semester? So you're creating a new literature review? Okay. That's fine. So have you found some research?
I completed the steps you asked to.
Okay. So let's take a look here, Kellcy.
And I have a question about the literature review, teacher.
Yes.
Because Antonio told us like last semester that we shouldn't add anything from us, like only like the authors. And I heard you say that we should add something from us because otherwise we'll be plagiarism. So like.
Okay, adding something from. All right. My recommendation for the literature review is yes, you want to basically say what others have done, what do other people know about this topic, okay, first. Now, when you order or organize your literature review, and I have some links, I'll talk to you in a few minutes, but I want to work with you guys really closely about how you're going to organize your literature review because you're basically creating an argument in your literature review. So when you create an argument, you base it on a thesis statement. So a thesis statement is one sentence that describes the main idea of your topic, of your literature review. Think of the thesis statement as the one sentence that answers your research questions. Now imagine, the research questions occur at the end of your literature review.
Yes, sir.
All right. So what you're going to be saying is these authors say this about this topic. You're going to conclude by saying you want to investigate this thing now. Whatever you want to investigate, you've already mentioned what others have said about that, right? So that's why the connection between the thesis statement and the research questions is the thesis statement is the one simple answer, one sentence that answers more or less the research questions, generally speaking. All right, now, when you organize your literature review, you're going to be creating claims, and this is what I talk about here a lot in this video and I mention in this page. You're going to be basically creating claims or assertions or ideas, right, or interpretations that come from you, that are original ideas, okay, that are supported by the authors. Now, those claims, what we don't want, and I think what Tonio is saying, and I agree, is that you don't want sentences like, teachers should do this, or I think this. You don't want to say that. But when you create an idea, original idea, declarative sentence, an assertion or a claim, and it's your own idea, in a way, you're stating your ideas. And I don't want to say in a way it's your opinions, but it's your ideas. So the main thing is to think about organizing your ideas around claims. And when I say claims, think of like the topic sentence would be a claim. So each paragraph, you're going to create a claim, an assertion, an idea, right? And then you're going to back it up, support the authors, right? And then you're going to, in your own words, analyze that or synthesize what the author said. You're going to kind of bring it and comment on that, but you're not going to say they should do this or they should do that. Just kind of keep the modals out of it, and you'll be okay. And don't use first person, right? Keep staying in the third person. Avoid modals, and you should be okay. But you want to compare and contrast and make sense of what the authors say, right? So that's kind of the idea with the literature review is you're not going to express your opinion like teachers should do this and this, but you are creating an argument, your own argument based on the evidence, based on what other authors say. Because if you say something and you say, well, I say this based on, well, these authors said this.
Because you read the article.
Right, then whatever you say means something, right? They can say, okay, well, I can't argue that because these other authors are, saying this. So in the argument, and I talk about this here, is that whatever you do talk about, let's say you talk about technology, and some authors say this Twitter is a really good tool for this and this.
That it has some relevance, right?
Well, relevance, but also that you present the other side of the argument.
Oh, yeah, like
so remember a counter argument.
Yeah.
So it's not always good, right? There's always going to be some other people that say, well, no, but there's another perspective. And so you have to be you have to mention kind of both sides. How do authors differ in opinion? How are they the same?
Yes.
And
well, because I have like an idea, I don't know.
Okay.
Like I think I would like to mention like a general description of social networks at the first, and then the beneficial or positive aspects of using them because I'm authors. I mention them.
All right.
And then the
all right. So there's two things that we need to think about.
Yes.
And because social networks there's a lot of social networks,
I need
right?
to.
All right. Here's the thing.
Yes.
You have a lot of social networks to talk about in your literature review.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have the practicalities of what you're going to observe, thinking, okay, let's think ahead a month, 2 months. When you start collecting and you're observing and you're thinking, okay, who am I going to observe? What technologies are possible or practical or that you think that you can find? Because, for example, if you decide to talk about Google Plus in your literature review, but nobody's even heard of Google Plus, nobody's going to be using it, then you don't want to do that.
Yes. Well,
now, so one thing that we need to talk about here, the first thing that I noticed about social networks and all this is that one option would be to focus on one type of social network.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's just assume Facebook. All right.
Yes, I think.
All right, so let's just say Facebook. Now, your literature review, you could talk about Facebook, any literature that you can find that relates to Facebook, but you're not going to maybe talk only about Facebook. You might talk about other theories, social cultural theories, or social linguistic theories, or connectivist theories, actor network theories. I mean, there are a lot of theoretical theories out there that relate to possibly this interaction in Facebook. So, there's still a lot. You're not going to have a problem finding literature, but my suggestion would be don't feel like you have to talk about Facebook, Google Plus, Twitter, whatever else. All these other. You don't want to just mention it just to mention it. You want to focus on, in this case, really a social network. I would choose one.
Yes.
And I would say I wish to learn more about how Facebook can be used because I want to find out. Yes, you must use that.
Yeah, I think I will choose Facebook.
Okay.
A lot of the book articles.
Right, and you might mention very briefly, depending on the situation, but I would focus more on one, and then focus on other related theories that you think kind of merge into this.
Yes.
All right, so let's go to the, bueno, does that answer the question that you had? Okay, so, all right, let's move on here because I want to find out, what do you want to find out? Let's think of 1 or 2 question words, or maybe 3 question words that relate to the question, the research problem here.
Yes, I have to, well, I don't know. I was thinking yesterday, but I don't know if they apply or not. I should change Facebook, right? I should.
All right, now
it's Facebook.
Right, it could be Facebook, and be careful with are they are Facebook effective when they use in teaching. So, what are the benefits and drawbacks? All right, now let's see. Should I? Okay, so let's think about how. Think about some aspect of, it can be a linguistic concept, it can be even just a general teaching practice, like for example, the most common 3 categories: curriculum or planning, instruction or teaching, and assessment. Those are 3 general categories. And we also have in linguistics, as you know, reading, writing, listening, speaking. We have vocabulary. We also have grammar. We also have pronunciation. I mean, we have a lot of different grammatical concepts that we can talk about. What I'd like is to tie into 1 or 2 of those. Okay, not all of them, but just 1 or 2, some aspect, or materials. Well, materials is kind of part of the social, the Facebook and the social network. But try to tie it into one other key concept or concepts to make it, to narrow it down, right? To narrow it down. So, what do you want to research about Facebook? The way in which they interact, you know, and we have to think about, are they? I'm assuming they're going to be using it outside the classroom. Right? Maybe do they use it inside the classroom? But think about, okay, what are you going to observe? And this kind of ties into step 2. What do you want to examine? Okay, so we have to be, we have to think more specifically. What is it that you want to examine? For example, if they're using Facebook for writing, how does the teacher correct using Facebook? How does feedback happen? I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that you can do this, and that's why we need to be. It needs to be something that is very clear about what you can examine and measure. When you say, "What am I going to examine?" we have to ask ourselves, "Well, how am I going to measure it?" So, what do you think? Is there anything that comes to mind as far as something that you're interested in? Using Facebook, but some other element of the language classroom that relates to linguistics, or even just kind of a teaching situation like instruction, assessment, or curriculum.
I don't know, I just like...
Or anything in the studies. We can talk about the studies that you have. Maybe we can get some ideas from that. Because there may or may not be a lot of research on published articles on Facebook and language learning. I don't know. We'd have to look at it. But I think we should be able to find a few. Self-directed learning.
Oh, this is for Twitter.
Okay, but you can get some ideas here. Maybe self-directed learning using Facebook, and see kind of what they do, because the tool, I don't think we'll see much difference in there's some differences, but there are a lot of commonalities between what you can research. If you get some good ideas from a study on Twitter, maybe you can do something similar, but instead of Twitter, Facebook.
Yes.
Right? Maybe. So was there anything here that caught your attention as far as something that you might
Well, this one said that it was really productive for teachers because they can be connected with other teachers and they share information, and that is related more with the teachers, and the other one said that the Facebook was a great idea, I don't remember the word, because the students are always there. So if the teacher can be more like connected with the students, more they have more like, how do you say?
They're more accessible.
Yes, accessible. Like you send the I don't know, the activity, and then they have the opportunity.
Okay, so right there are two options. Like one is, do you want to focus just on teachers in Facebook, or do you want to focus on how the teacher is accessible to the students using Facebook, and then you can find evidence. Okay, when does the teacher use Facebook? How does the teacher use Facebook? How do the students respond? Do kind of like a discourse kind of analysis between the communication between teacher and students, or between teachers if you just want to focus on teachers.
I think I would like to focus on between like the teacher and students, so they can like make the work easier.
Oh, okay.
Well, not easier, but yeah.
Or we just want to find out how they interact.
Yes.
For one is how they interact. So, frequency, how often, and then what does the teacher say? So, how often and what do they say? Like, what's the content? And you could do an analysis. Is it more just like social, like friend type thing, or do they use the Facebook for more academic stuff? Yeah. Yeah.
So
what else do you have?
I have the benefits and pitfalls. We talk about. Well, here they mention all of this.
What do they mention, like the benefits or?
Yes.
Pitfalls. But is that research? Is that a primary research article?
I believe it is, but I don't know.
Okay, so if it's a primary research article, we have to look for a methods section and like results. And I don't really see one. This looks more like a theoretical. And this might help you in your literature review, but to get ideas right now, we need to try to focus on primary research articles so you can try to find better examples of things that you can use with regard to your process, your instruments, your participants. So, but there might be something here. Let's see, there are images.
May I go for my notebook?
Sure, absolutely. Okay. So, I mean, it could be something like, one option would be looking at the interaction between the teacher and the students and finding out, how they use Facebook, like how, and you could have two research questions. One could be, how does the teacher use Facebook for academic purposes?
And I need to interview the teacher, right, or make.
Yeah, and another question could be something like, how do they use Facebook just, for other, like personal, or not personal, but non-academic purposes, right? So you could actually classify these differently to see if there are, and you need to get some ideas from, and I'm throwing out suggestions without not having looked at this, so you need to try to find research where maybe they researched for academic purposes and other purposes in the same class in the same time, but maybe there was interaction that was just more social. That wasn't really for academic purposes, so they just, wished each other a happy birthday or whatever, but there's some sort of level of communication with the students that was not academic, but that someone did a research on that. Right, so if you can find that, then you can say, okay, well maybe I want to do the same thing, and you can adapt your study right? So that's why I'm saying if you can find examples of research and see, how they use it, how often. Some maybe a question about how often. How is it used outside of class to complement what they do in class? Like, what's the relationship to kind of compare between the use of Facebook outside versus how they draw that in class? You know what I mean? So maybe they don't use Facebook in class, like, on the computer, but they may say, okay, do this homework assignment, and they say it outside of class in Facebook, and then they expect in class that the students have already done that. So you talk about that connection between how the academic work in Facebook outside of class relates to what they do in class. Right? Again, it helps if you can find some research that someone did something similar to that. But I'm just thinking about possibilities of, some research, that maybe some others have done. But you need to verify this, see if you can find some other. And if you start looking and dig deeper, if you find 2 or 3 articles, you're going to get some ideas. You might say, okay, I see this. I want to investigate the same thing. And that's kind of where we need to go, so we can bring it in a little bit narrower, the topic. But I think the first step is to focus just on Facebook, or just one social network, and then from there think about one other aspect, like some sort of linguistic or teaching concept that you can do. So I would think about that and revisit your research questions here, thinking along these lines. Okay.
Can we come and ask you even though it's not like...
Absolutely. Yeah. So...
Well, I think I will try to do this like this weekend.
Okay.
I start
once you find your articles, bring your articles back. Let's have the same discussion again, so we can kind of narrow down these research questions. And go ahead. It looks like you've added your 4 steps. Just modify this as we have whatever we have, right? I'm going to give you back this, okay?
Yes,
and just keep this up to date. So whatever changes, make sure this is up to date. Do you have any questions about how to copy and paste the template over?
I haven't.
Okay, from this page here at the bottom, there's a Thesis Seminar template. There are 2 ways you can do it. I know you've already copied and pasted or shared the other document, but an easy way to copy this document is to go into File and click Make a Copy. And this makes a copy to your own Google Drive.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and it copies exactly the way it is. It'll change the name, it'll say copy, so you'll have to go back and you can change the title. But you'll have to go back and reshare it and change the link, because it'll be a new document. If you don't want to do that, then you can copy this like that, Control A, copy and paste it over to your own document, but it does not copy the header, and it won't copy the footer with the page numbers. So you'll have to go back and add the header and the footer, and you can do that by clicking Insert, and you have header here and footer here. Okay. So it'll be like 2 steps, but you don't have to change. You don't have to share the document again or change the link. That'll stay the same. But please start with this, because here you'll have all of the information organized based on the main template. You can just go into each section, and you can start work on your literature review. Go ahead and include the research questions at the end, and go ahead and put them however you think they are now. If they change, that's fine. Just change it as we need to. But go ahead and put the research questions first. That way and you can also see kind of where you're going with the literature review. And then also take a look at modules for week 2, developing an argument, where I talk about, and others talk about, how to organize your ideas. And one of the easiest ways, I think, to do this is to go and fill out these headings first. think of this like as a big outline, and you can organize your ideas based on the headings first and then go back and insert. Don't worry too much about the introduction and conclusion. Okay, we'll do that later. Just start organizing your thoughts around an argument, and do look at this first before you start your literature review, so you can kind of see, well, how, first I'm going to talk about this, then I'm going to talk about this. You have your ideas kind of laid out beforehand. Any other questions or concerns, doubts? No? I think you can use some of these articles that you have
yes,
here.
And I also found like this book, and like in the chapter I will use this chapter 7, is Facebook's hidden potential. Facebook as an educational
Right.
portal. And it comes how to use it, so maybe I can take an idea.
And you know, I mentioned it. You don't have to mention all of the technologies, but if you find an article like this, like Twitter, and let's say you find something like that's really interesting, like autonomous learning using Twitter, you can talk about the article talking about Twitter, and compare that to other studies of Facebook that relate to autonomous learning, because maybe the topic's autonomous learning, and then you have articles from Twitter, Facebook, or whatever. You can include it that way. Not so much saying, here's Twitter, everything about Twitter, but now it's more like autonomous learning is the heading, and whatever technologies you think, you know, that you find in literature, right? So,
yes, well, I think I will read and.
Okay, all right.
I will come next week.
Okay. All right, so I'll see you next week. Yeah, you can come by anytime if you want to discuss your articles first before you start.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.